Hi, I'm Joe Neal, and for the past 30 years, I've been doing a bird survey in the upper region of the Buffalo River, and it's called the Compton Breeding Bird Survey. And about 1 million people a year go over to the Buffalo River and to visit, and most people don't really have time to get into the nuts and bolts of all the birds over there. But um, I just wanted to share a little bit about what we find in our survey and some other things. So, welcome to the upper part of the Buffalo National River. And I want to start first by just telling you that birds are distributed on the landscape according to their ecological requirements. And of course, so are other life forms. And so the Breeding Bird Survey was an idea from the 1960s about a way to collect data systematically so that we could better understand impacts on birds and what to do about them. And of course, that applies to other things like bumblebees. And I was a wildlife biologist for the USDA Forest Service. I'm retired now, but I've done the Compton Breeding Bird Survey since 1990. And that's a scarlet tanager back there. And that just gives you a map of where it is. Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Northwest Arkansas is on the far left. And the Compton Breeding Bird Survey is in Newton County, as you can see, about 50 miles east of Fayetteville. And it's a wild, rugged country. And there have been several publications about the Breeding Bird Survey over the years. That's one of them. And all those black dots are other breeding bird surveys. So there's a good data set being collected about nesting birds. And just here's a few things I'll be mentioning while I'm talking. Probably the thing that is best known in this whole spot is either the Compton survey is Ponca, where everybody goes to rent a canoe, and the Hawksbill, where everybody goes to stand out on a rock. And those two places are both right on this breeding bird survey. And we don't have to go through all this, but this data has been analyzed. That's really what I'm trying to show you here. And about which birds are most common in which habitats. And here's a little bit of the rural landscape along the route. And this kind of mixes the prairie ecosystems that are up on top with grasslands. And how about that? That's the Buffalo River down below there. Looks like a Ken Smith photograph, doesn't it? And that's another Ken Smith type photograph showing what it's like early on a June morning where they're doing the survey, and it's pretty foggy down in the bottom. And there are bluff lines. We don't get on these, but this is the goat trail, which is near the survey. I think that's Richard Stoffaker standing there on the goat trail. And some native plants. And the Boxley Baptist Church with Cave Mountain behind it. And one of the iconic birds along that route are field sparrows. They have the most beautiful of all the songs of birds in Arkansas. And they sing in these big fields along the route. And they're chipping sparrows. And dick sissels. And blue grosbeaks and all the big farm fields have blue grosbeaks. And indigo buntings are widespread. Eastern bluebirds nest all along the route of where there's farmland. And yellow-billed cuckoos sometimes come out of the woods and chase bugs. And here there was one right on a fence right along the side of the road. Yellow-billed cuckoo. And even though I'm driving along there trying to keep up with the survey, it's hard to not stop and look at things like this. And a couple of friends of mine that have worked on bird projects for years. Um, the guy that's sitting on the right with the cans next to him, that's Doug James, who actually started this route back in the 1960s. And that's his friend, Bill Bell from Fort Smith. And they've both done a lot of work on the birds in this area. And that's my daughter and one of her friends about to jump off the Ponca Low Water Bridge. That's right on the survey route. But we don't stop to jump off the bridge. But when the survey's done, we can do that. And that's Ariel in the blue suit, kind of behind with the dark hair. And the old Valines cabin is right along the route. And there are elk in the fields at Ponca. And a common breeding bird, red-winged blackbird. And American goldfinches. And eastern meadowlarks. And a barn swallow that wants to be fed by an adult. Eastern kingbirds. Eastern towhees. And there are turkeys down in those bottoms along the Buffalo River. How about that? And there are bobwhites still along that route. They've declined in so many places. But there's a lot of traditional old farmland adjoining the woods and thickets that seems to work for the northern bobwhite. And there's a lot of discussion about why we've lost bobwhites, but mostly it's because if you use the land too heavily, you clean it up too much, you get rid of all the edges, you take out all the cover, and then you introduce predators like house cats that run loose, that's what happens to northern bobwhites, why they decline. And catbirds and cardinals. And how about that? It's a summer tanager that's just changing into the red. And that's what they look like right in the middle of summer, most of them, the males. And there's a spot or two along the survey that actually gets down to the Buffalo River. And there are interesting flowers there. This is called water willow. And a bird that nests along there, Louisiana water thrush. And there was a great project done on the Buffalo River and some of the other streams by Lisa Marshall several years ago when she was a graduate student at U of A Fayetteville. And you can see she's got one perched up on her fingers that she'd put a band on it. And so in these feeder streams into the Buffalo, she found that as the water became more polluted, the Louisiana water thrush had to increase the size of their territories, and that leads to fewer water thrushes. And there are swallows along the river. These are rough-winged swallows. And green herons nest. And wood ducks. This is an adult female with a bunch of ducklings. And look at that. Couple of females, couple of males. This is at the Ponca Mill Pond, which is along the Breeding Bird Survey. And for several years, there was an attempt to reestablish trumpeter swans as a breeding bird, and it didn't work out in the Buffalo Valley, though it did work out in a few other places. And this is one that tried to nest. It was not successful. This is Cave Mountain, which is kind of toward the end of the survey. And it kind of looks like this early in the morning. How about that? I call them angel slides. You just know angels have got to be sliding down from heaven on stuff like that. And that is on top of Cave Mountain, and it's looking out into the upper Buffalo wilderness. How about that? That's really worth protecting. And that's a young pileated woodpecker. No, it's not. That's a pileated woodpecker with a nest. Sorry. And a hairy woodpecker, they like the old woods too. And look at that big dude. That's a timber rattler up on Cave Mountain. Been a lot of interesting studies of timber rattlers. I've been all over that place and I've seen quite a few timber rattlers, and I'm still alive to tell. And this is one of the most spectacular birds, scarlet tanager. This is a male scarlet tanager. How about that? That color's not exaggerated at all. That's how they look. And red-eyed vireo's a very handsome bird. And look at that red eye. It's on a nest. You can actually see the red eye. I love it. And oven birds, that's the one that when you hear them, they go, teacher, 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 teacher. And broadwing hawks nest in the woods. And here's some youngins. Black and white warbler is a breeding bird. Eastern wood pewee. And this is a very cool little flycatcher. I'm trying to describe, see if I could orient you. I was looking down in this nest, and I was looking down through the bush, and then I noticed this bunch of oak catkins hanging down. Then I noticed the bird, and it's an Acadian flycatcher. It's the only nest like this that I've ever seen. How about that? So normally, all you would see would be those oak catkins hanging down, but I was just in a certain spot where I was above it. And how about this? And how about that? This one's a pawpaw. And there's the fruits. And a bird that's gotten pretty rare is cerulean warbler, and Mitchell Pruitt, who's an outstanding photographer, allowed me to use this photograph of cerulean warbler. And they've declined a lot all throughout their range. And wood thrush, and they've really declined a lot too, and there's a lot of things that are driving that destruction, but a lot of it is just we're impacting too much of their habitat. So I just put this one up here, that the black areas on this map show where there's been a lot of decline of wood thrushes, and you see we're in that, in northwest Arkansas. So just in sum, the Compton Breeding Bird Survey through 2013, I'd seen a grand total of 104 species over the years, and this is just sort of a distribution of them. Some have increased, like red-eyed vireos. Others have decreased a lot, like loggerhead shrikes. 53 of the 104 are pretty stable. And I just want to mention citizen activity, and the Buffalo National River. You know that dams were planned for the Buffalo National River through the 1960s, and it was private citizens who rose up against these dams, and they made the political process work, and that is the dams were stopped, and instead of creating another big lake, they created a national park. And so that's why we see a lot of that stuff that I've been showing you today. And Dr. Neal Compton from Bentonville was a key player in that, founding the Ozark Society and working with politicians to get the job done of saving the Buffalo River. And that's his book. This is a great read if you're interested in conservation battles at a local level. It's very well written, and it's available from the University of Arkansas Press. And when I was working on this program, they were celebrating Ken Smith, who's got the microphone in front of him, and Kelly Mulholland of Still on the Hill was playing a concert, and they were celebrating 50 years since they'd stopped the dams on the Buffalo River. And we have annual field trips in the summer into this area, and you can see some of the people on an Audubon Society field trip. But I don't know what they're looking at, but they're pretty looking, aren't they? And I thank you.